All right, EntreArchitect community, it's 4 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time for the EntreArchitect Context and Clarity live conversation for Thursday, November 17th, 2022. Thanks for joining us today. As you get here, say hi. Let us know that you're here and let us know where you're joining this conversation from. Where's here for you? If we've never met before, my name's Jeff. I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason, so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. Doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm and you said, hey, there's a month and a half left of this year and I'm on the runway to starting my own thing, or you have your own thing. Maybe you've had your own firm for a year or 10 years or 29 years, starting to rethink or reimagine what that firm could or maybe even should be. All of the topics that we cover, one topic every day, they all fall under the broad umbrella of the business of architecture, and they're all the need to know topics for the success of entrepreneur architects just like you. Thanks for joining us today. As usual, for Context and Clarity Live, I am joined by Katharine MacPhail. Hi, Katharine.
Hello, Jeff. It's all I could do not to say those words along with you. I have to literally bite my tongue.
Yeah, everybody can probably recite them by now.
Can't help myself.
You should do that. Just jump in sometime.
Okay, remember you said that, Jeff.
Yeah, next week. While I'm wondering what happened. Yeah. So something tells me you're not in Massachusetts today.
No, I'm in Ohio. And, I'm thinking about, I was going to paint my office blue, but now I'm thinking, I don't like that. It's just not going to happen. I don't like it.
You don't like the color? Okay. Mm-mm. Well, it's a good test.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of depressing a little bit. You think?
Well, let the hotel chain know.
But Chris says I still count as Massachusetts as far as the count.
Yeah, he's doing the count for the most people from any location. So,
yeah.
I see Chris is in Massachusetts, and we're going to count you as Massachusetts. So Massachusetts has 2 votes, but I see that Scott Thrift is in from hazy San Francisco today. He's in the room first, which means he is the winner of today's John Kinney Memorial Crocheted Bathtub Award. So congrats on that, Scott. Thanks for joining us. Christian's in Ithaca, New York. Jessica's in Los Angeles. Hi, Mark R. LePage from Waxhaw, North Carolina. Matthew's joining us today. He's on Facebook, which is a good reminder. If you are on Facebook right now and you're commenting away and you're going, hey, why is my comment not showing up like Melanie's or like Chris's? Or Matthews, it's because you're in a private Facebook group, and Facebook has some rules, some privacy rules that say your name, your likeness, your comment can't leave that group unless you give permission. So there is a URL in the bottom left corner of your screen right now. It's chat.restream.io/FB, as in Facebook. And if you open another browser window, type that in, a couple of clicks later, you'll give Facebook permission to communicate with Restream, which is the platform that we have here, that we use here for Context and Clarity Live. And all of your problems, every single one of them, will be solved at chat.restream.io/FB, like Facebook. So give that a try. It looks like maybe Luciana is joining us from Maryland, right? But maybe not even Massachusetts. I thought Luciana was in Maryland.
So that's why Chris cares that she's here.
Oh, got it.
Otherwise, well, that'd be weird, right?
Yeah, it would be. Michael G., we see you over there on YouTube. Thanks for joining us today. And Melanie mentioned her earlier. Hi, Melanie, and Charlotte. Hope it's nicer in Charlotte than it is in Indianapolis. And Steve is joining us from Des Moines, and I'll bet it's about as miserable in Des Moines today as it is in Indianapolis. So I'm there with you, Steve.
How miserable is it? Because I think I'm going to get your weather even sooner than I normally do.
Yes. Yeah. Probably in a few hours, you're going to get my weather, and it's
not good.
A little bit of flurries, a lot of wind, and it was miserable working out in the garage this afternoon or at lunchtime. So body temperature may still not be back up to where it needs to be. Gene, we see you in Annapolis, Maryland as well. Thanks for joining us, everybody. All right. We have a guest. I've been waiting for this conversation. I'm really looking forward to this. We were talking backstage before we got started. Katharine told our guest today that she's a big fan. I am also. You'll understand more about that here in a few minutes. But our guest is in the green room right now, just absolutely blasting Bruce Springsteen music and eating nerd ropes. That's what it was, right?
Yes,
Is
nerd
that what
ropes.
nerd ropes? So
Jeff doesn't know how good those are, so you'll have to
no,
excuse him.
it's lost to me, but maybe we'll learn more about those as we go today. We don't want to leave them back there too much longer. So
Nope.
why don't we do this? Our guest today is an architect, an owner, an innovator, and maybe even a futurist. He's the host of the EntreArchitect podcast, the president and a co-owner of Mancini Duffy in New York, Christian Giordano. Welcome to Context and Clarity Live.
Hey, all right, there I am. How are you? Thank you guys so much for having me.
It's great to have you.
I've been enjoying just sitting back here listening and watching the comments come up. Pretty cool. So
it is cool. It's so this is something that you don't get to have when you record your podcast. You don't get to have that live audience. And I really enjoy it. I mean, I love the interaction that we can have. I love the fact that our community can participate in a very real way in these conversations. So maybe one day in the future for the EntreArchitect podcast,
yeah.
But it's a different sort of feel, I know. Why nerd ropes?
What? Mine.
Why is that? Why are nerd ropes your favorite candy?
You guys asked me what my favorite candy was, and I'm not a huge chocolate fan. I like the sour kind of candies and nerds, and then my kids were for Halloween obsessed with these nerds ropes, and they are awesome. So, but you as you eat them, I mean, you feel them rotting your teeth. You can truly feel it happening at the exact same time, but it's still worth it. Yeah.
Well, so maybe this is your entry into expanding Mancini Duffy services to the dental community.
Listen, the 3D printers we have, they can print with dental material. You just print some new teeth, you'll be all set.
That's an idea. I loved that. On your website, I love that Ralph the puppy. Having all those different colors. That was very cool. I like that.
Yeah, we won that. We won that award 2 years in a row, and then we did some other elaborate version of one, and we didn't win. We thought it was our best. And my guys that do all this craziness, they were so annoyed that they decided they're never entering it again.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah, that's disappointing.
So for those who haven't seen that on your website, what's the award? What's the competition?
It's like the Herman Miller Puppy Award. You basically decorate a puppy, this plastic puppy that they have. It's part of their furniture accessory line, and you decorate it. I think one year we did an AR VR version. One year we 3D printed essentially a skeleton of it, which was really, really well done. And then another year we grew moss on it. I think that's the one we didn't win. Which was pretty cool. So yeah,
so like a cheetah puppy kind of.
Exactly. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So you're back there in the green room eating nerds ropes. And the good thing is you can 3D print new teeth once the show is over to offset all of that. What Bruce Springsteen song were you listening to backstage and why?
So I don't know. My standard answer is that, I like Thunder Road. That's probably, my favorite song. But there's another song called Jackson Cage. It's a really obscure song. But there's a line in there like, there's something like, there's always going to be one more day. And, it's always going to be that way, something like that. And it really is about, not procrastinating. And you gotta, I think in this particular song's case, the person's trying to get out of whatever hellhole they live in, and they're not making an effort to do it. And you just think, well, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. And I just like that that attitude of, there's always going to be tomorrow. So if you want to make a change or do something, you better do it like right now, kind of thing. So.
Nice.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah. And I have no doubt that our resident musicologist, Rod Werner, is probably, if he doesn't already know the lyrics, he's probably researching for a future comment that's coming very quickly here. So we'll see what Rod comes up with on that front. I mentioned in the introduction that you're the host of the EntreArchitect podcast, and as Katharine said backstage, that she's a big fan. I'm a big fan. But my question is, why EntreArchitect, and what are you trying to do? Why the title? Why the name EntreArchitect, and what are you trying to do with that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm always blown away by anyone that tells me that they're a fan and that they listen to the podcast. It really,
Same here.
It throws me for a loop every time, because
Wow.
I can't. I think when we started, I thought, nobody's going to listen to this. Are you crazy? Like, except for my parents.
Yeah.
And it's really just taken on a whole life of its own, which is awesome. And I'm so grateful to everybody that listens. Even someone that came into our office earlier today was telling me about different episodes and what they listen to, and it truly blows me away. So there's no real romantic story around the name of the EntreArchitect, unfortunately. It really was me sitting with Brand Groupies, which is our social media and PR company, good friends of mine from where I live in Monmouth County, New Jersey. And it was really coming up with the title, and we had done this whole discovery where they really wanted to learn a little bit about me and my core values. And it really, everything I said was, I don't want to be your typical architect. We don't want to have the same kind of firm. That's what we were already, on the road to doing. We want to do different types of projects. We want to come at design differently. We want to use technology differently. Not that I don't like other architects, because I have some of my most amazing friends are all architects and very into that. But there are architects that, will just annoy people, right? There are annoying architects, and those are the ones that I would be anti-architect of. And it just came out that, well, maybe Christian, you're the anti-architect. You're trying to change the profession in some way. And that's really how that name came about. Plus, obviously, it's got a little bit of a catchy title. And what I found is, if you put yourself out there on the internet, because I really had never done this before, where I put myself out there, and I kind of knew it was coming. And there are people that, really kind of have come at me with how dare you say this about architects? And I said, well, you got to listen to the podcast, because it's about as positive as it gets.
Yeah, it's true. Well, they're outing themselves too as the annoying ones, honestly.
That's right. That's right. So the goal with the podcast is to have a totally open and honest conversation about what architects do well, what we don't do well, what we can improve, how we screw things up. Where in the, let's call it, in the order of things, architects exist, whether that's at the front of the line for some people, if it's the contractor, or at the back of the line, if we're if we're dealing with real estate brokers or something like that. And where and how can we fit in? How can we fit in better? What can we do a better job at? And it's meant to be constructive and really learn from people. I think one of my most recent ones was this guy, Fred Biscaglia, from JLL. It's probably my most listened to podcast. And I think we had a very open conversation about architects and project managers, and sort of that conflict that exists just right from the beginning, basically for no reason. And how do we solve for that? We're all on the same team. We all come at it from a great place. We want to do a good job. We want to do good design. We want to keep the client happy. We want the client to be a repeat client. We want to make money. All of the things that are important, yet somehow we end up on a team, and on day one, we're all enemies. And why is that? And how can we fix that? And how can we go about just having that conversation? And I'm not saying that all projects are like that. But no project should be like that whatsoever. So really, until it's 100% nothing like that, there's always more that we can improve. So that's really been the goal of the podcast, is to have an open conversation.
Yeah. That particular episode caught my attention because a classmate of mine had a firm that went through an mergers and acquisitions process with JLL about a year ago. So it's like, I'm gonna have to listen to that one. It was a great conversation, I thought.
Yeah, and I also want to put in a plug for the Chris Voss episode, because that was not only, I know I kind of a fangirl about Chris Voss, but it was a great episode though, and he really talked about what we had read about in our book, because we read his book, and then how can you apply that to architecture. So it was great. It was great.
Yeah, that was fun, because I had taken a Chris Voss kind of seminar, where he teaches you how to negotiate. He puts you on the spot, in an audience, and he makes you negotiate with him or his son or other people. Yeah, it's really stressful.
Yeah, that would be stressful.
And when he agreed to come on the podcast, I thought, okay, so this is a huge guest. How can I relate this back to architecture? And I thought he did a real, and I will tell you an inside scoop. Hopefully our client is not listening. Right after that podcast, I am telling you, within a couple hours after that podcast, and we talked about negotiating and architects standing up for themselves and not caving to get the project. He had given me some pointers. I forget exactly what they were, but it was something like, you need to, if the client tries to talk you down in price, say, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I'm providing a certain amount of value for the price that I'm giving you. And if I were to bring my cost down, that value is not going to be there for you. And probably about 2 hours later, I had a sort of mini negotiating with one of our clients for a large hotel. And he said to me, is there anything you can do to bring down the price? And I will tell you, for the first time in my professional career, I used that line, and I told him no. And I said, no, I'm sorry, but this is our price. We worked out the fee. We know to deliver this value is the fee that we need. And to my shock and awe, the client said, okay, that's great. We'll sign the proposal and get it back to you. And I was like, wow, this actually worked. Holy crap.
I'm writing that down right now.
Yeah. When you were having that conversation with Chris, I remember that advice that he gave you. And one of the things that struck me as in that part of the conversation was, he said, some people just try to beat you down for their entertainment. And it's like, that's how many of us have run across that over the course of our career? I think it's probably a lot of us.
And it sounds silly. I've written those things down. And when we do get into a, sparring match over cost, I don't win all of them as easily as I do, but I try to use a lot of those points. They're actually quite helpful.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
And as Katharine said, I don't remember which month it was, maybe April, Katharine?
Yeah, sometime in the spring, I think.
Yeah. So those of you in the audience, we used Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference as our maybe April, maybe March, maybe May Context and Clarity Book Club book. So you could go back and find that episode and find our takeaways from that book. But I'd really just encourage you to read the book or listen to it, or however you consume
or listen to that podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
That pretty much distills it all down to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
He then responds to. So anyway, it was great. And you always have very interesting people on the show. So anybody out there, if you're looking for another architecture podcast, definitely check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I dropped the URL. I misspelled it. It's theentiarchitect.com is the website, the landing page for Christian's podcast there. So I left the E out.
There.
So theentiarchitect.com. And
awesome.
Go listen to that episode. It was a fantastic conversation.
And you know what else? I just want to say one more thing about podcasts is that obviously anybody can put one out there, because here we are. No, anybody can put one out there, but it's kind of actually in the old days, before something like this, I never would have the chance to speak with you, or most of us wouldn't. And so instead, your voice is going out to all these people who then can hear your message from your actual, your own voice, and it humanizes you too, because you're a guy interviewing people.
And I've worked hard on it because, initially I remember the first few episodes, I was very nervous, right? I'm not a professional broadcaster. I had never really spoken into a microphone at any length, right? And I really wanted to make sure that I had done research on guests. I wanted to make sure that, and it would take me sometimes an entire weekend to prepare. Like I read everything. I've now been able to get it down to my prep time being like, let's say 4 hours, 5 hours or something like that on a Sunday, and I'm comfortable with kind of a pace. But I worked with this woman, MK Larson, who is a TED Talk coach.
Oh, wow.
And she had listened to a bunch of the podcasts, and she's told me something that, she said, "Oh, you know what the best part of your podcast is?" And I said, "No." And she said, "It's when you actually talk a little bit about yourself and then relate it back to the client, to the person you're interviewing." And I thought, wow, that's not really what I thought, because aren't I supposed to not talk about myself and just ask questions? And then once that kind of clicked, it really then became a conversation. Like you'd normally just have a regular old conversation and comfortable like this, right? Like we're just talking. So yeah. So for anyone out there, it's actually not as hard as I thought it was going to be. I think you just need a point of view, good or bad.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, right? It's where are you going to plant your flag? What's your point of view going to be, and just go for it. And if somebody else has a podcast that's similar, they don't have the exact same point of view that you do, so don't worry about it. Do your thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And check out I've got it spelled right now. Check out the EntreArchitect podcast wherever you consume podcasts, but the EntreArchitect.com would be an easy way to find out a lot of information about the podcast. So a lot of great episodes there. When in the intro that you do, you mentioned disruption. And so one of the questions I have is, does the profession of architecture need to be disrupted?
So, yes, I think it does, right? I think the simple answer is yes. And for if no other reason, it's to just move us forward. If you really look at the way we design and the way that we document and then ultimately into construction, it's really no different than we've been doing, 50, 100, whatever years ago. I think the changeover to BIM has certainly helped, right? But the hand drafting to AutoCAD really didn't move the profession forward at all. It just maybe automated a couple of little things. But the push to BIM has definitely helped, or at least it's a starting point. I don't think any of us use BIM to the real. I mean, maybe there are firms out there that do, and some construction companies do, where we're using it to its fullest potential. And when I say fullest potential, it's, we put all this effort into building this level of detail, and then we flatten it out and we print it out on a bunch of giant pieces of paper, and then we hand it to the town to approve. We hand it to the city. We jump into whatever meetings with large sheets of drawings, and yes, sometimes we do it digitally, but for the most part we're still building from flat stuff. And where do we take that, and how do we get the digital model to start really representing how we're going to build in the future? And that all goes back to talking and working together. If we get everybody on the same page and we can start delivering the digital file, literally handing over the Revit model to the city to approve, and then handing that over to the contractor to improve, using AR and VR and point clouds and projection mapping and robotics to begin to lay things out, we're going to move the profession forward just from that BIM model alone. So if we don't do that, someone is going to come along and take it away from us, just like a lot of our profession in the past. Our profession gets chipped away at bit by bit by bit. If the architect was at one point the master builder, we are not that anymore. There are some that are that, on the design build side and their delivery methods, but 99% of architects are not, right? We just draw and then we hand it over and we hope it kind of all comes out at the end of the day how we designed it and on budget. And so you never know. An Amazon might come along and figure out another way of delivering a building, right? There's really no reason why you couldn't order a industrial warehouse building on Amazon exactly to your specs, right? And then have it delivered to site. I mean, I'm surprised that you don't do that yet. You do that with Butler buildings and things like that. And yeah, okay, fine, whatever. It's a crappy industrial building. But at some point, that's going to be something else. Oh, maybe I'm going to order my my small one-story retail spot that way. And then next thing you know, it's going to bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're going to lose more and more of that, of the profession.
Yeah. That reminds me that one of the per practice classes that I teach, I basically run it like a business plan competition. And so in 3 weeks, I think it is, they have Shark Tank. That's what our final is. So I assemble sharks and, they have to pitch their projects. One of the projects it's concerned with gaming and the way that gaming companies, whether it's EA Sports or whatever the company is, how they develop and market games. And so their idea is basically to come in and use AI, build an AI engine that in a way allows the users to design their own worlds in whatever this game is. It's absolutely fascinating to hear them talk about this. And so this is the point in the semester where we have to really start working on the pitches. They practice it because they've got to be fairly polished once they get to Shark Tank in a few weeks. And the other night they started out their pitch talking about the fact that, and I don't remember the games that they were talking about, but there was a game that one of the companies developed. It took them, I think they said 3 years to develop the game, 800 people on 4 continents to develop this game, which is, you hear that, it's like, oh my gosh, I mean, that's worse than architecture. But they rolled that out and they said, and this morning I saw an ad on Instagram for an app where I can just say words and through AI, it will develop artwork based on those words. What happens when that comes to gaming design? And I sat there and I went, yep, exactly. Yeah. And how far is that from architecture?
It's I agree. There are some amazing AI, but we experiment with some of those AI platforms. And I think if we look at AI, not necessarily as it's going to take over our jobs or take over our profession, but it's another supplement to it, I think we can engage it right now and start using it and get ahead of it in a sense, right? I think for you as the professor, right, the design studios, someone could come with an AI generated building design and you're not going to have a clue as to that. And they may look like, a very innovative designer. And I think it's okay to encourage the use of that for inspiration. It's just at the end of the day, it may be just as arbitrary as a painting, right? I mean, Frank Gehry gets a lot of his inspiration from Matisse and the Matisse cutouts, and that's where all of those shapes come from. So it's really no different than that, but you've really got to kind of figure it out along the way. Now, there's beautiful parts of AI that they can iterate on things, right? If they can do optimal amount of windows and door shapes and whatever, and you don't need to sit there and figure all of that out, that's great. But if it takes over the design, that's when we have to get a little worried.
Yeah.
May I ask a question? Is it even possible right now to put on VR goggles and go into a Revit model with your client? Just be in the atrium, let's say. Can you be?
So that's one of the things that we've developed is our own technology, our own patent pending technology. We call it the tool belt, and it is essentially a view into the Revit model. So what happens is when a designer is working, they're working in Revit or in or Rhino, depending upon which platform we may be using for whatever kind of project. They're working away, and our software reduces the polygon count, pulls all the textures, materials, whatever are part of it, and then pushes it into our software called the tool belt. And the tool belt is essentially, at the end user side, it's a rendering engine, right? It's a you pop on those goggles and you're now in your Revit model.
Oh, I can't even stand it. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's great. And
Yeah,
we call
really
it the tool
excited
belt
about that.
because you look down and you see a series of tools around your belt.
No
little
way,
cheesy.
really along your belt?
Yeah.
And then can you go like taller? Can you do that
That's
from
right.
inside the model with your client there?
So you get a very real time, it's instantaneous. So as the designer's working, that's the updated model. If a designer moves a chair, it moves
Oh,
in the tool belt software, or
wow.
vice versa. The end user can move the chair or the windows, whatever it might be, change the textures, and it's reverse compatible back into Revit. So that is, that's become our process. So you get honestly, it's a gamified version of design.
My heart is pounding so hard right now because that's so exciting. The idea of like just being inside of, your designs and changing it while you're in there. I don't know. It would also make an interesting movie. Like a Lego movie. Eventually we'll have a movie where that's it. Anyway, very exciting.
Well,
Sorry.
it strikes me, earlier you were talking about, and we've talked about this in the undergrad class before. It's like, why are we building these BIM models and then printing things out on paper? That's what keeps me interested, I think, is the perspectives of students going, oh, what's wrong with you old people? But as you were talking about that, it's okay, yeah, now we're talking about delivering the design, right? And going from the design to the construction phase. But then when you're talking about that tool belt, that's very much, or at least the way that I'm understanding and thinking about it, is that's very much client experience, which I think is also incredibly important.
Mm.
We had a topic earlier this week for context and clarity, and I pulled the Maya Angelou quote. People won't remember what you say or what you do, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I think that's something we really need to pay attention to in the profession. So as you're developing things, tools, because you have not only the tool belt, but you have the design lab and a lot of very innovative things at Mancini Duffy. Is there a specific focus where, hey, we've got to think about the client first, or we've got to think about the delivery method first, or is it just, hey, we're just brainstorming all the time trying to figure out a way to be more innovative and streamlined and efficient in what we do?
It's both, actually. The way that the design lab started was I wanted to. I had a random idea that we had bought a 3D printer, and we had always talked about research and development and what could we do to get ahead of things. And this was probably 10 years ago, and we were going to. I was at a wedding or some event, and they, how you go there and they have the collapsible chairs, and they're always ugly. And I thought, oh, we could design a better collapsible chair, and we should 3D print it. And that was the original idea. And it turns out that was really hard to do. There's a reason why those collapsible chairs are the way they are. But it led us down a road of the 3D printing. And then we started the lab. And then it became a weekly meeting. And a group of us would get together and we would just spitball ideas. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if? And we had a long, long laundry list of stuff that we'd take, once a week. We'd spend an hour in there. And then along the way, the idea of VR came up, and how could we really utilize VR? And I was always fascinated by, so I grew up, when I went to architecture school, I did 3D modeling. I mean, I was really good at 3D modeling. And it was when it first started, you had to reboot your computer into like MS-DOS and bring up 3D Studio Max 1. And you'd have to do these, this modeling, and it was a lot of commands and stuff. And there's no way I could even remember how to start that now. But I was really good at 3D modeling. And that eventually evolved as I became a designer and then a senior designer. And I had clients, and I would do a lot of those renderings myself. And I would be, we'd go to a place. I remember a client who became a very, very close friend. She said to me, we were looking at a broadcast space, this amazing building that was done. And she said to me, wow, I really didn't expect it to look like this. It's great, but I didn't expect it to look like this. And I thought, my God, it looks identical to the renderings. Like, it looks identical. What are you talking about? And so what I realized is that the renderings, as great as they are, they don't give that sense of place and that feel, that Maya Angelou quote, right? You need to be in a space and interact with it and feel it around you. And so that's where we started pushing the idea of virtual reality. And the early virtual reality was just that. It was kind of post-production VR. And our thought, so getting back to, how did this all come about? In our weekly meetings, as we got more and more serious about things, we said, well, maybe there's a process that we could create where we're not wasting time. We're not doing post-production. We're not, creating essentially a virtual reality rendering version, but how can we connect it? And then the other thing is, we start every project late. And I think every other architect starts every project late, right? You're asked to do a proposal, you do the proposal, you hurry up, you get that done, decisions aren't made. It's supposed to start in November, and but instead it starts in January, and you're 2 months behind already on day one, but the end date doesn't move, right? And you're like, oh God, now we're behind. So great, thanks. So this was another way of jumping ahead. If we could eliminate the sort of weekly meeting, and the weekly meeting where we're doing one thing and then we're focusing on that, and then we're coming back with it revised again the week later, and then we're revising that again another week and another week. If we could collapse weeks of work into one meeting, boy, we could really then take advantage of those weeks and actually do what we're good at and design, right? So if we can get a user in our 3D program in the tool belt on day one, even as early on as pre-lease or right about when you're about to build or start a site or look at a site and start to develop a massing concept, if we can get them in there and they can understand spatially or formally how something's going to work, we're already weeks ahead. Now we can spend a week and design it, and then we bring them back, and we can we could have another session with them. We can eliminate options immediately, or we can add options. We can move things around, and we can do things that would normally take weeks and weeks and weeks. We can do them in hours and get real decisions made, and then refine them and design them, rather than just rushing through. And designing in construction basically is where we end up. I'm sure a lot of people on this feel like they design a lot of things in construction because they didn't have time, like in the olden days 10 years ago, when you could spend a little time actually drawing.
So
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. Along those lines, people were asking, does it take a special skill set to design with the client right there? Are they actually literally there with you in the space with the VR goggles? Is it different than like just taking out the trace and drawing over that?
It's very similar. If you set the mindset of it's like doing it with trace in front of a client, it's very freeing. Initially, I could tell you the very first session we did like this, I know for a fact, because the designer and I always talk about it, it was very nerve-wracking. I mean, we weren't sure, A, if the technology was going to work, or B, how they were going to react to it. But now what's happened is it's become our process. It is what we do. So every designer, and it's actually great for designers, junior designers, right out of school, you're in the lab, you're with the client. and you're moving things around. You're designing with them in that space. And again, you're not taking direction necessarily from them. You're experimenting. You're sketching. You're sketching in Revit. You're sketching in 3D. You're sketching in this VR environment. And nothing's perfect when you leave there, but it's pretty close, right? And the bathrooms are over there, the lobby's on that side of the building. And we all agree, yes, this feels right. This works. Now we're going to actually sit back. We're going to go back to our desk and we're going to hunker down and we're going to get into all those details. So people get comfortable with it over time. You don't need any special skill set, and that was by design. You just work in Revit like you would work any other day if you were sitting at home, sitting at your desk. The client just happens to be there. But they love it.
When you say there, are they like on, are you doing a screen share? Are they on with the goggles? I'm imagining that you're in the space with them, with the goggles.
Yes, in an ideal world, they come to our office or any of our offices. They put on the goggles, and we do it in our lab, right, which is a fully immersive 3D environment that has sensors and sound and things like that. That's the best way of doing it.
They must love it. They must love that. Yeah,
they do.
I would love it.
But then we did adapt it for COVID, and we've also adapted it for sort of the client that wants to be in their model all the time. So sort of I call it the asynchronous meeting, right? Where we can host the model and host the VR experience in a cloud. And so they'll get a password, they'll go into their model, they're seeing their model live. It's not the same quality, it's not with the goggles on, but they can move around within it on a screen. Or we can all jump in it, right, with a virtual avatar version of ourselves. And now we're all in the model and we can have a virtual meeting. So that we did over COVID because we couldn't come to the office. So we figured out another,
so awesome.
We call it the multiplayer VR.
It's like practically the metaverse right there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's so awesome. So also Rod had said, if you can have any spatial experience via AI, including historic buildings, say living in Versailles or falling water, why bother actually building a building? Which is why VR goggles are so cool, because you don't have to go anywhere.
I don't know. I get it, but there's still nothing like going to a real place. It's still a simulation at the end of the day. And to me, there's nothing more, I know from the designers in our office and me as in that experience, there's nothing more uplifting than seeing your client, in their building and seeing your creation come to life in the physical world. I think there is a place in the metaverse. I'm not exactly sure what it is, if it's a digital twin. I'm sure there's a commerce version of it. I'm sure, I try not to be, the person, and not that I was this person, but the person that, said, oh, nobody's ever going to buy anything on the internet and nobody's going to buy clothing or sneakers on the internet, because clearly that was wrong. At some point, something with the metaverse and the Web3 is going to be there. There's going to be a virtualized version. I think that'll be there. I'm not exactly sure where the architect fits in. We've had so many inquiries into being the architect of the metaverse. And designing spaces and stuff. And I've stayed away from it all because there's no one metaverse.
Right.
I don't want to spend real money and buy a virtual plot of land. To me, that just seems like an enormous waste of money.
Well, we already met the architect of the metaverse anyway, so it's too late. What was his name? He was from Romania or something, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
George
interviewed him.
Palecki, I think.
He's 25.
Yep. Yeah.
He may figure it out. You never know. There's a place for it.
Yep.
We're still like a brick and mortar kind of, at the end, with all the tech, all the VR, all the AR, all the innovation that we do, we're still, at the end of the day, we want to build beautiful buildings and beautiful projects and have great design. That is what the driver is. All of these are tools, and we want to get to use those tools and I don't want to say disrupt, but it is part of that, right? Move the industry forward with the use of technology, but all at the end to get a great product.
Is it for sale? The tool belt? Can I get it?
Yes, there is a website, thetoolbelt.com. I believe that's it, thetoolbelt.com. Right now, it's basically free. So you can download it.
I can afford that.
We are looking to bring it to market. We are testing it in a few schools and universities. We are developing a marketing plan around it. So there's a future for it as its own thing.
Wow. I just, can you imagine having, like, when you're in architecture school and you have to sit through everybody's project and the crits and blah, blah. Wouldn't it be so much more exciting if you could go into that person's building and just kind of experience it for yourself instead of having to stand there in the crowd? Anyway, sorry. Okay. I'm just a little too excited about it.
It is indeed thetoolbelt.com. So it's in the bottom left of your screen right now, the URL,
nice.
thetoolbelt.com. Check it out. Collaboration made simple. That's a good tagline too. So when you think about your goals for Mancini Duffy, looking out 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, what are those goals, and how do they involve tech and innovation?
The goals for the company in general is to grow, and to grow in a number of different ways, whether that's through acquisition or natural attrition here with those kind of stepping up, wanting to hopefully open up offices in other regions, and to grow from a project market sector point of view. We've done a really nice job, and it's been a goal to set out and be in many market sectors. So Mancini was known for corporate interiors for many, many years, and we've really diversified that practice to doing new hotels and work at aviation work at airports, and industrial and manufacturing, which is actually a really interesting kind of design challenge a lot of times, to medical and hospitals and operating rooms and things like that. So the more diverse the project type, the better. And then ultimately also geographically, we're doing restaurants all over the country right now. We're licensed in probably 40 some odd states, and we've got sort of small entities set up in a lot of those states where we're really trying to get into those other markets and be as diverse as possible in terms of where we do it and what we do. And I think that, I've gone through many recessions, so I want to make sure, the culture of our firm is extremely important. The happiness of everyone that works here is extremely important. We really are a fun group. It's a fun place to work, and we do good work, but we definitely have a lot of fun while doing it. And kind of keeping everybody engaged, obviously employed in any kind of market condition, and thriving and moving up in their career is really, what it's about for me and my partners. I am genuinely grateful to every single person that works here. I really, sometimes I have to, remind myself, like, wow, this is amazing. Like, people actually work here, and yes, we're bringing in the kinds of work, but they're just as passionate about the clients that I have the relationship with, and now it's their relationship. And it's just a great feeling to know that everybody's really in this to see it succeed and grow. And then on the technology side, we continue to advance in our lab as to what we want to do. I am constantly in front of the firm talking about the new initiatives that we have coming up, and anyone, as new people come in, anyone that has an idea, we want to hear it. We're here to support it. We put money towards it. I mean, if you ask anyone that's worked in our lab on an initiative, we spend money on it. I mean, we don't, my CFO calls me Santa Claus because we have Bola, who you've had on. She calls me Santa Claus because I barely ever say no to a new toy. And if we can experiment with something, and maybe it's something that will push the profession forward in some other way. And that's kind of how we generate that excitement. So we've done everything from, we have a Roomba, the vacuum cleaner, with a LiDAR scanner on it that we can drive around the office and do surveys.
Oh, wow.
Pretty cool. Totally random idea. We 3D printed all the parts. We've 3D printed light fixtures for our clients, for Peloton, and one of the goals is to 3D print parts of the building, but not like a 3D printed, China concrete blob and then cover it up. It's to 3D print a final, very intricate detail or part of a wall system or something that you couldn't create, with traditional manufacturing. Could we 3D print a part of our building and then eventually bigger parts of our building? And what does that mean, and why do we want to do that? We developed a lawn mowing app because we had a really cool idea that we thought we could have the Uber for lawn mowing. It turns out someone else had already thought of that, but you never know where things are going to go. And it's it's just a fun way of going about work, and taking an hour out of a week to ideate on things really gives everybody a lot of something to look forward to, and something a little bit different from the day to day.
Yeah.
Where do I sign up? I'm ready.
Yeah. I was just thinking that I could move to New York.
I know that part of your backstory is you get your master's degree from UCLA because you wanted to go and study with Frank Gehry. So I know there's a lot of mentorship and inspiration that comes from Gehry, and obviously there's Frank Gehry, the architect. There's Frank Gehry, the firm, and there's Gehry Technologies. Is that part of the DNA of Mancini Duffy? Are you on the same trajectory there?
I think a lot of it is, right. I liked, I went to a very traditional architecture school undergraduate, which was the University of Miami in Florida. New urbanism was taught there. It was hand drawing. Eventually, we obviously got into 3D modeling and some 3D work, but it was very traditional in terms of its approach to architecture. Ironically, years and years later, I look back at that as an extremely valuable education because of the way that we were taught that traditional proportion, the hand to drawing connection. For as advanced tech as we are, I still need to take out a piece of trace paper and have that hand-eye coordination for scale. So that's a really valuable part of kind of how I learned. But part of me, you rebelled against that, right? It was like, well, why do we have to learn this traditional stuff? And I remember a lot of my professors that, I would be the one coming in with it was during the period of deconstructivism. And I would come in with, sort of a traditional, whatever Roman looking building, but I deconstructed it, right? And I part of me liked kind of pissing the professors off. And challenging them in that respect, and then or having to defend my ideas. I always liked the words to defend stuff. It was fun to do that, and I could back it up with like cool drawings or whatever. And so when I really discovered Gehry, in a way, that's kind of what he was doing, right? He was taking sort of the traditional architecture and turning it around on his head, and he had many predecessors before him. So I always wanted to go to California and study with Gehry and work there, and ultimately did. What I learned about Gehry, which I think was surprising, was how lovely of a person he was, and just what a nice man, and treated everyone with such amazing respect. I think he kind of he didn't become an architect, I think, until he was 50 or something like that. So he really appreciated, he reveled in the fact that he had done well, and that his ideas were there, and that he had these amazing clients, and he had these relationships with his clients that he took seriously. So from a design point of view, I kind of walked away less about the design and more about the interpersonal kind of thing, how he connected with people at his firm and how he connected with his clients.
Yeah, that's amazing. I had not even considered the fact that you probably went from Duany to Gehry, and that's got to be quite a mind trip.
Exactly.
On a lot of levels. That's probably an entirely different conversation, but that just clicked. It's like, oh my gosh. That had to have been a mind trip there. That's fascinating. We're right at the top of the hour, so I know we need to be respectful of everybody's time and get this wrapped up. But what's one piece of advice or even a challenge that you have for entrepreneur architects, certainly many of our community are smaller firms, but what do you say to entrepreneur architects out there as they think about the future of their own work?
Yeah, so I would say for, those that have already started their firm, it's a tough road. There's no doubt. I can say that, for us, this was a firm that I, bought from the previous generation. So we kind of had a running start in a sense, right? We had a name, we had an established brand, we had theoretically processes in place, although, they kind of weren't that great. And so a lot of this has been figuring it out along the way as we go. And sometimes it's been, it's been great. And sometimes, I've made plenty of mistakes along the way and trying to figure out how we can do it, and how we can improve from those mistakes. And I've made mistakes, I think, with personnel and not being straightforward with people. And I've learned now much better to how to interact with people and say, not just say the right thing, but be honest with people. And I think the more honest I could be, the better the relationships were internally. And then same with clients. I spent a lot of time getting new clients and being with clients. It's a long road. I play the long game. If I befriend a client, I don't expect a new client. I don't expect a project for 10 years, and if it came sooner, great. And if it doesn't, okay. But if we can have a great relationship along the way, a lot of times that give and take will have an amazing effect down the road. I'd say for those that work at a large firm, I think I said this on EntreArchitect at one point and some of the other podcasts. Don't be afraid to ask your principal and partner and the partners in your firm and tell them your agenda. Say to them, hey, one day I want to have my own firm. One day I want to be a partner in this firm. How do I get there? There are people that have said that to me and to my other partners, and that is the best thing I've ever heard. Even if you want to one day leave us and start your own firm and be a competitor, I am fine with that. That means you've got a passion and a drive, and you're going to do X amount of things to get to that point. Now, obviously, we don't want you stealing our clients and all that good stuff, but most of it comes from a good place. Hey, how can I get to this point? So I would say for most people, it's just ask, have a conversation with whoever, owns or runs your firm. How can I get there? What can I do? What's the, if getting clients is hard. How do you even begin to do that? Right. And talk to the people that you work with. Can I come to a networking event? Can I come to that dinner with the client? Let me see how you talk to a client. Sure, I'll come along for drinks with this person. Whatever that might be, the more experience you get in that, the more comfortable you get. I had never asked, I remember last thing, one of the partners at the previous firm I worked at said to me, Christian, you're going to go to a networking event. You have to come back with 3 business cards. And when you come back, you then have to follow up with one of those business cards and take that person to lunch. And I was like, oh my God, this is so scary. Holy cow. And I had to force myself to go and make conversation with random people. And it wasn't as hard as I thought. And I got those business cards. I was very proud of myself when I showed them the business cards. I think I might have been the only one that actually ever brought back 3 business cards. And I then followed up and asked some random broker, out on a lunch date, basically. And he and I are still friends to this day, that one broker.
Nice.
And we do a lot of work together. So you've got to just take the leap and do it.
Yeah, that's great advice.
That's a good one.
That's really good. Christian, I've had a lot of fun with this. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for inspiring us. And for everybody out there in the audience, if you want to know more about Mancini Duffy, check out, look at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, manciniduffy.com. They're doing a lot of really interesting, cool, innovative things. So check them out at manciniduffy.com. Of course, now we've got a little bit of a history with them, with Bolanli, and now with Christian. So we appreciate you, appreciate both of you, but Bolanli's not here to accept it. But thank you, Christian, very much for all of this, and really looking forward to seeing how you innovate in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for having me and always being supportive of myself and obviously Bola and the entire Mancini crew and everything we do. So look forward to doing it again one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And for everybody out there, I say this every week, but thank you to all of you for making context and clarity a thing, because if it weren't for that, we would not be having this conversation right now. You know, Christian said earlier that he's always surprised when somebody says that they listen to his podcast. I've said this a couple of times recently. I always figure there's a day that I'm going to show up for this and I'm the only one here. So you prove me wrong every single day. So thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with Christian. And as always, please take care of yourselves. Be well, stay safe, keep those around you safe and well. Find a little bit of time to breathe and relax. Find a way to rejuvenate. We do this every day. You do have to pace yourself. And thank you all for going along this long journey with us. We'll see you again tomorrow, everybody. Thanks.